Harriet Osei had been coming to the Carloway room every Thursday for 11 years, and she had long since stopped noticing the windows. That was the thing about beauty, you stopped seeing it. The curve of the ceiling, the way the warm amber light caught the brushed brass fixtures at 7 in the evening, the window bay that ran the full east wall and made the city look, on clear nights, like something designed rather than merely grown. All of it had become furniture. The thing you looked past to reach the menu. She noticed it again on Thursday because of what happened at the door. She had been settled at table 9, her table, the one the staff knew to hold, for perhaps 20 minutes when Zara Mensah arrived. Harriet did not know her name yet. What she knew, in the first moment, was posture. The woman who came through the Carloway room's glass entrance was perhaps 45, in a deep charcoal coat she wore the way architects wore things, with precision, not performance. She carried a leather portfolio the way other people carry nothing, like it was simply part of her. Her hair was natural and close-cropped. Her bearing was the kind that comes not from arrogance but from having spent years in rooms where you were the only one who looked like you, and having decided, at some point, that this was the room's limitation and not yours. She smiled at the host stand. She gave her name. Dominic Hale had worked the Carloway room's entrance for 6 years, and in 6 years Harriet had formed a reliable impression of him, a man who understood perfectly the difference between the guests the room wanted to impress and the guests who simply had reservations. He was not crude about it. He was never loud. His prejudice lived in his posture, in the half-second pause before he reached for the book, in the practiced furrow of his brow. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm not seeing you here." The woman, Zara, though Harriet did not know it yet, kept her smile. "Mensah," she said. "Z. Mensah. Reservation for 2, 7:15. I confirmed it this morning." Dominic turned the page. He did not look at her while he turned it. "We have a situation this evening," he said. "The room is being held for members and their guests. I should have flagged that, I do apologize. Is that a new policy?" The question was so quiet, so perfectly conversational, that Harriet almost missed it. She had tilted in her chair without realizing. "It's applicable this evening, yes." "I see." Zara glanced past him into the room that was perhaps 2/3 full, with several tables unoccupied in plain sight, and then she looked back at him. "The couple who came in just behind me," she said. They were seated. Dominic's expression did not change. "They are guests of a member. And my reservation. I can offer you our events entrance, around on Pemberton. Our events coordinator would be happy to." "That's for staff," Zara said. It was not an accusation. It was simply a fact, stated at the same volume as everything else she had said. "The Pemberton entrance is the service entrance. I think we both know that." There was a silence. Dominic filled it with the practiced kind of regret, a slight downward tilt of the head, a small spreading of the hands. "Sorry. Rules. Nothing to be done." Harriet Osei had been married to an architect for 31 years. She had watched him navigate rooms that weren't built for him, with a grace that cost him something she could never quite measure. She recognized, in the woman at the door, something she had seen in her late husband's face 1,000 times, the decision to remain exactly as still and exactly as composed as the room required, even when the room was wrong. Zara Mensah did not go toward the Pemberton entrance. She stepped to the side, just out of the main traffic line, and set her portfolio against the wall with the careful attention of someone who expects to pick it up again soon. She drew her phone from her coat pocket. She looked at it for one moment, the way a person looks when they have decided something, and then she found the number she wanted and pressed call. It rang twice. "Graham," she said. "I'm sorry to bother you on a Thursday. I'm standing in the lobby of the Carloway room." A pause. "Yes, that one." Another pause, shorter. "I have a confirmed reservation that the Maître D has decided not to honor. He's directing me to the Pemberton entrance." Her voice had not risen. It had not tightened. It was the same voice she had used at the host stand, level, clear, warm without being soft. "I thought you'd want to know, since the lease renewal is," she listened. "Yes. Exactly." She listened again for a moment. "All right. Thank you, Graham." She lowered the phone. Across the room, Harriet Osei reached for her wine and then did not pick it up. She was watching the door to the back corridor, the one that led, she had always assumed, to the kitchen and the manager's office. It opened 40 seconds later, and Richard Sable, the Carloway Room's general manager, came through it with the particular velocity of a man who has just received a phone call he was not prepared for. He was a tall man, Richard, and in 6 years Harriet had never seen him move at anything other than a comfortable, assured stroll. He was not strolling now. He spoke to Dominic first. Low and very brief. Then he turned to Zara. "Ms. Mensah." His voice had a quality Harriet could not quite read from across the room, somewhere between apology and shock, with something underneath both of them that might have been recognition. "I'm Richard Sable. I am deeply sorry for this." "Who called you?" Zara asked. "Mr. Ashby." She nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "Will you allow me to show you to your table?" "That would be nice," she said, and picked up her portfolio. It was the way she moved through the room that did it. Not triumphant, she wasn't built that way, and the evening wasn't that kind of evening. She walked the way she had walked in, which was to say at her own pace, with the same precise attention she had brought to the door. Richard Sable walked half a step ahead of her, as a general manager who is in the middle of an apology walks, opening the path. He brought her to the window bay. The table he stopped at was the third from the north end of the east wall, a round, four-top dressed for two, set against the glass so that the city spread below it like a blueprint. It was, Harriet recognized without quite knowing why, the best table in the room. Zara set her portfolio against the chair and stood for a moment looking at the window. Not at the city. At the window, at the frame of it, the proportion, the way the light came through. The way a person looks at something they designed. Harriet's hand tightened around her wine glass. "You built this," she said, out loud, to no one in particular. The woman at table 6, a younger woman in a green blouse who had been watching the same thing, looked over. "The windows," Harriet said. "She built this room." She hadn't meant to speak. But the words had come out, and they were true, and something about the truth of them, said aloud in this room that had refused to honor the woman who made it, felt like the only appropriate response. The woman in the green blouse looked at Zara Mensah at the window table and then looked back at Harriet and then, without entirely seeming to decide to, set her own glass down and began to applaud. It started quietly. Table 6, then table 4, then the couple near the bar who had come in just after Zara and had watched the whole thing from their seats and had felt the shape of it even before they understood the details. By the time it reached Harriet herself, who raised both her hands and brought them together in the particular, measured way of a woman who has clapped for things worth clapping for, it was not loud, exactly, but it filled the room, and there was nothing tentative about it. Zara Mensah turned from the window. She looked at the room that was standing with her, at the faces turned toward her, and for a moment, just one moment, the composure she had held through the entire evening showed its cost. Not in tears. Not in anything that might have been called a spectacle. Just in the slight softening around her eyes, the fractional change in the line of her shoulders, the way a person looks when they have been carrying something very heavy for a long time and a room full of strangers has, without being asked, offered to acknowledge the weight. She nodded. Simple. Dignified. "Thank you." She sat down. Dominic Hale was not at the host stand. He had been removed from the floor before Zara reached her table, quietly, and by Richard Sable personally, who had said only that Dominic should take the evening, and that they would speak in the morning. The host stand was staffed by a junior member of the floor team who watched the applause with wide eyes and later told a colleague that she had not fully understood, until that moment, what it meant when people said a room could change. What Harriet Osei learned over the course of the evening, partly from Richard Sable, who stopped by her table to offer a glass of something by way of apology, and partly from the woman in the green blouse, who had worked briefly for Zara's firm as a junior designer 6 years ago, was this. The Carloway Room sat inside a building called Ashby House. The building had been commissioned a decade ago by Graham Ashby, a property developer who had wanted something that would still be standing and still be admired in 100 years. He had hired the firm of Mensah and Osei, no relation to Harriet, though the name had made her breath catch, and it was Zara Mensah herself who had led the project through 3 years of design, negotiation, revision, and construction. The window bay on the east wall had been her solution to a structural problem that 2 previous firms had declared unsolvable. The curve of the ceiling was hers. The brushed brass fixtures were hers. The way the amber light fell at 7 in the evening, making the room feel like the inside of something worth protecting, that was Zara Mensah's. The Carloway room leased its space from Graham Ashby. Its lease came up for renewal in 6 weeks. Graham Ashby, Harriet later heard, had made 2 phone calls that evening. The first was to the Carloway room's general manager. The second was to the club's board chair, with a short message that he expected a formal accounting of the evening's events, and that the lease renewal conversation would pause until he had it. He had also sent Zara Mensah a text before either call. Harriet did not know what it said. She imagined it was brief. Graham Ashby had the reputation of a man who did not use 3 words when one would do. She imagined it said something close to, "I know. I'm sorry. You built this." Dominic Hale was placed on administrative review. The board of the Carloway room opened a complaint pattern audit covering the prior 18 months of entrance logs, a review that, the junior designer at Table 6 told Harriet, was long overdue. The general manager issued a formal written apology to Zara Mensah, hand-delivered to her office the following morning on Carloway room stationery, co-signed by the board chair. The club also, at Graham Ashby's suggestion, commissioned a small plaque for the window bay. It was installed 3 weeks later, on the interior sill of the east wall's third window from the north, the table where Zara had been seated. It read, "This room designed by Mensah and Osei Architects, 2015. It was small. It was exact. It was, as Harriet Osei told her daughter that Sunday over the phone, exactly the right size for a room that had needed reminding whose hands had made it beautiful. Harriet had stayed until 9 that Thursday. She did not usually stay past 8. But she had ordered a second glass of wine and then a third, and she had watched the room from table 9, her table, the one the staff knew to hold, and she had felt something shift that she did not have a precise word for. Not justice, exactly, though it was that. Not satisfaction, though it was that too. It was more like recognition. The city turning in its sleep. The room remembering what it was. Zara Mensah's guest arrived at 7:40, a younger woman in her firm, come to discuss a project, who had heard none of what happened and had to be told over the breadbasket, and who listened with wide eyes that filled, once, and then did not. They worked through dinner in the easy way of 2 people who know each other's shorthand, drawing on the tablecloth with a bread knife between courses, making the kind of marks that have to be explained to the staff who clear the table. When Zara Mensah left at 9:15, she passed Harriet's table. She did not say anything. She simply paused, the way one person pauses for another when a room has been through something together, and gave a small nod, the same nod she had given the applause, the same contained, precise acknowledgement. "Thank you." And then she was gone, into the city she had partly shaped, her portfolio under her arm, her coat exact. Harriet Osei looked at the window table, now cleared and reset for tomorrow. She thought of what she had said, she built this, and how strange it was that the saying of it had mattered. How little it cost to speak a true thing in a room that needed to hear it. She set her glass down and pulled on her coat and walked out through the front entrance, the one on the main street, the only entrance anyone ought to use, into the cool October dark, past the Carloway room's lit windows, past the east wall's great panes of glass, past the city that spread away below them like something designed rather than merely grown. She did not look back. But she was already seeing the windows again. After 11 years. Seeing them for the first time in a long time, which meant, she supposed, that she was seeing them right.